This is Paul Nobles from Eat to Perform. I am with April Blackford, and you can see my dog Kira in the background right there. Kira, say hi. Hopefully Kira won't end up barking somewhere in the middle of the podcast like she normally does. April, you want to say hi to everyone?
Hi, everyone. And I also wanted to tell Lindsay Sims happy birthday.
Well, there we go. Yes, happy birthday. She's one of our first people.
She's an OG, yes.
She is a definite OG, which seems sort of funny for us to say that, right? Though I am wearing camouflage, so, and I think that maybe makes me kind of badass.
I just had to go a little feminine today,
Like pretty much every other podcast for the last 3 years.
No, I went feminine with like Barbie pink rather than like badass black.
That's true. We do have a lot of new people, obviously joining Eat to Perform right now, so that's a pretty exciting time. We have more people in this webinar than we've had in a very long time. What a lot of people that are watching it right now should probably realize is that you can see not only this recording, but you can see all the recordings for the last 3 years by just going to our YouTube channel at eattoperform.com. This also gets published as a podcast probably tomorrow morning. It depends on when I can get to do it. It's not hard to do necessarily, but sometimes my computer gets a little finicky. So I kind of gave like this tease of what the topic would be tonight. April sort of knows what we're going to talk about in the beginning here, but almost no one else does. And so that is going to be kind of interesting for people. I told the Eat to Perform staff to sign on to check out this webinar because we were going to talk about some interesting stuff. So rather than getting into all the specifics, I'm going to give a very kind of succinct answer to this question. But basically, from this point forward, Eat to Perform is going to be employee-owned. And what that means is that I'm going to give a large portion of Eat to Perform as a gift to the people who built it. And I believe in this idea because, well, one, I'm not in this for Ferraris. I'm in this for all of the people that, trust us, to see results and to get, a positive experience from what we do. And so for the last 3 years, we had a lot of people that have put up with a lot of bull from me. I mean, a lot of people don't realize that, like, startups, this is pretty standard for startups. I mean, if you're not familiar with startups, just to sort of explain it, I was talking to Suzanne before this because we were having the first week of Monday, we have an OG's meeting with there's like 4 moderators. I mean, literally a year and a half ago, we had less than 10 staff members. And so to stay in touch with those people, I meet with them every month at 6 p.m. The first weekend of the first week of every month, sorry. So I was talking to Suzanne, April, about it, and she's like, I don't understand what this means, I don't know why I keep trying to do Southern accents. It just doesn't work for me. I guess I've just been in the North too long.
Yeah, because your Southern accents are horrible. But I will pardon you a little bit because Tom says that every accent I attempt sounds like a pirate. So,
arg. So Suzanne she's like, I don't understand what this means. Am I going to have to pay for Eat to Perform? And, Jill was with me. I said, this is the easiest way to explain it. I said, let's say Reebok buys us for $500 million. They're going to have to cut you a check for $1 million. Speaking to Suzanne. Obviously, every employee is going to be different. We have different levels. I did want to say, I did say to Suzanne, like 5 seconds after that, I was like, don't just go and like buy Mai Tais on a beach somewhere, because April ain't going to let me sell Eat to Perform anytime soon. But there is no selling Eat to Perform. I mean, it's just, Eat to Perform is us, and it's our relationships with you guys. And so, someone buying us, it wouldn't take them more than 5 minutes to realize that without us, there is no Eat to Perform. And that's where this decision came in, was because Eat to Perform is not me. Eat to Perform is all the people that you guys interact with on a daily basis. And I want those people to know, how much I am thankful for, what they've been able to do. And specifically April, obviously, has been kind of a big part of what we've become. But, there's literally, 50, 60 people that make a difference for you guys on a daily basis. And I think, when you're part of an organization like this, that is kind of small. I mean, it's small, but, people know who we are, like big people in the industry know who we are. We have almost as many fans as MyFitnessPal, as an example, on Facebook. We routinely get more engagement than big brands like CrossFit. So yeah, it's kind of cool that people are interested in what we have to say. I think the thing that about having a business like this, and I didn't, the first time I'd heard someone say this was Steve Jobs, and it might have been in the Steve Jobs movie, and basically he said, for me to win, someone has to lose. And if you look at Apple, becoming what they became, IBM had to lose in that scenario. The diet industry will need to lose, once we mature into what I know we can be, because nobody's saying, even to this day, I mean, people will say what we're saying, they're just not as maybe belligerent about it as we tend to be, just because we just know one way to success, and that's sustainable, that's long term, that's I had a woman ask me this weekend, with Eat to Perform, where do I start? I said, well, how many calories do you eat on a daily basis? And she goes, I have no idea at all. I was like, start there. I think that a lot of people, that especially people that are coming to dieting right now, it's the new year, everybody's really focused on that right now, but they don't know what they've been eating or why they've been eating it or whatever, right? And to a certain extent, that lack of information is what keeps them in the same cycle of constantly being lost. And the way that we try to provide information, is what I think differentiates us from other people. But it does require some level of patience for people, so we can kind of move on from there. You have any thoughts, my brand new business partner?
I was already your business partner. What are you talking about?
That's true.
I think it's very awesome. And and like what you said, it just goes to show we're not in it for Ferraris. I drive a Volkswagen Rabbit because it gets 35 miles to the gallon. Come on. It's ride or die. We're going to save each person at a time. And that's the thing for me is I take a vested interest in each and every person. And, a lot of the people that I've been working with have, been getting great success, and they're, spreading it to everyone, to the newbies. Don't be afraid. They've learned so much, and it's now they're, it's almost like they're kind of passing down their knowledge and things like that. And I think it's great for all the scared new people to see. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, because I think, I was talking to Brad about this the other day, where, once you start to seek out information, it becomes very addictive. And, once you like master one thing, you're like, wow, I didn't know that. I figured that out and I got a result. I wonder if there's other things, that I can sort of figure out. And then, we're all human. I mean, I stumble over the sleep hurdle fairly often, and every now and again I have to kind of whip myself back into shape and make sleep a priority again. And that just kind of is what it is. So we started off with that. I have been kind of doing like a story. April mentioned the ride or die thing, like 3 podcasts back towards the end of the podcast. We talked about ride or die, and so if you want to go check that out, I don't even know which one that one is. So maybe somebody could post that into the off topic group if people want to watch that. So one of the topics that I brought up today was the idea of people kind of sneak disrespecting themselves, where they'll say, oh, I feel so fat today, but now that I'm on Eat to Perform, blah, 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 right? And the idea being that, they took like this negative thing and then they kind of curbed it with, but now I'm Eat to Perform, so it's okay that I say these horrible things to myself. And I made the argument that for you to get better, you not only have to stop other people from saying things to you, but you have to stop playing those tapes in your own head. So most people know that, I have been sober for, like 29 years, coming up here in a few weeks. And in that process, I went through a fair amount of psychotherapy and, found out a lot about myself. And, a lot of what you guys see, the fact that I can like basically, tell you guys everything, comes from my experience with therapy and the things that I sort of figured out and sort of, walking through some difficult relationships. And so, one of the things about difficult relationships is you get into kind of these slippery situations with people and you don't always know how to kind of handle those situations. And so the situation that I'm going to talk about now, I'm going to let you guys know, this is my dad. If my dad were to hear this, my dad would not be upset by me talking about this, because my dad has come to peace with a lot of these things. In my therapy, my dad and my relationship, April met my dad in New York. And so clearly there's no negative type of stuff that between my dad and I. But, at some point I had to stand up for myself. And, when I did that, it allowed me to move on. And, the thing about being careful, because like one of the things that somebody said was, people are negative to them in real life. And the problem that you run into is you're going to have to encounter, like for instance, you're going to encounter your uncle at Thanksgiving. Suffering through your uncle, through Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter ain't that big a deal, but if your uncle is a negative person in your life on a day-to-day basis, that's going to wear on you. And, you're going to have to stand your ground. And so I'll just give you an example of what happened. So my dad and I, we were gambling, which, it's sort of funny because a lot of people know that, I used to play poker professionally. But ironically, I didn't really gamble all that much, things outside of poker. And we were doing sort of a martingale system. It's hard to explain. Martingale is basically you double your bets, and the way that most people do it, it's a foolproof way of winning as long as you have millions of dollars. But the reasons why tables have like maximum bets is so you can't get to that point. And if you don't understand, the intricacies of splitting or all these other things, then you can sort of run into problems. And part of the problem with the martingale system is that you'll have, like $2,000 on the line to win $50. And so that gets to be sort of brutal after a while. But my dad and I, we were doing this. I was young at that time, but I was pretty smart as it relates to math and things of that nature. And so we were, going to casinos throughout the Midwest, traveling. We went and played golf in Lutzen, Minnesota, and then we went to Chicago. And in that process, I think we won somewhere around $15,000 to $20,000. And, we were, feeling pretty good about that. It was the most, we had ever won. My dad has a kind of a bad history with gambling, and that's a little bit of the story here. For myself, when I looked at the $15,000 to $20,000, I looked at it like, wow, $15,000, $20,000, that's a lot of money. I didn't view it as anything other than a lot of money. And that was one of the things that allowed me to be good at poker, is that, I can make decisions, based on rational thought rather than kind of constantly chasing losses and things of this nature. And so we got to Aurora, Illinois. I remember it like, I think it was a Hollywood casino. And we were, I remember a lot about this because it was a big, big night. And we were on the third floor and we were playing blackjack, and like my dad just kind of lost his mind, and we lost all the money, And when I say we lost all the money, my dad lost all the money, chasing, the money throughout the process. And I was sort of divorced from it. It wasn't, it was kind of easy money, and it went away easy. So it really didn't bother me all that much. And so the next day we went to watch the Chicago Cubs. And I mean, we'd never been to Wrigley Field. Should have been kind of a cooler moment. I was in college at that time, and the way that I was making my money, I would go to Chicago routinely for baseball, selling baseball memorabilia. But whenever I would sell baseball memorabilia at the night in the daytime, I would often sell Bulls tickets, Bears tickets, whatever at night, scalping. And the way that I would do that is I would go to ticket brokers, around the area, a lot of which didn't have the means to buy expensive tickets. And so I would buy, anytime they would, get a buyer or somebody selling them tickets and they couldn't afford to buy the tickets, I would buy them and give them a little bit of a cut. Long story short, at one point, I think my dad ended up buying some tickets for me. I ended up walking away with a couple $1,000s for that event. We sat behind home plate. It was still kind of awkward in the air, but we were able to get through it, sort of enjoy it. Having that black cloud from the blackjack the night before was kind of a negative, but we were able to sort of get through it. And because I was making my living scalping tickets. Now, I'm sure my dad does have a little different version of this story. That's just kind of how these things work, right? And he might be the hero in his story. I don't know. And I'm sure he has a different point of view. You can ask him. You'll probably see him at Eat to Perform summer camp or something else, because like I said, my dad and we get along. We can even talk about situations like this fairly openly. So we're driving back to Minnesota, and my dad is still messed up in the head, similar to a lot of people that lose gambling, where they chase these losses about the money that he had lost. And so, from his perspective, he lost $20,000. And I actually think we did end up losing money. But it wasn't a lot. We didn't have a lot to lose. We just had, our winnings, and then we kind of went in the hole. So my dad says to me, he's like, are we going to split up the money from the Cubs game? And I was like, I don't know what you mean. He's like, well, didn't we make money from the Cubs game? I'm like, I don't know what you mean by we, that's how I make my living. I get through college, brokering tickets. And, it was well known at that point that that's what I did, and it wasn't like I was like super baller or anything like that, but I got by, I don't know if I've been using the F word a little too much, so I'm not going to use the F word. But I was like, Dad, I'm not giving you any of this money. I pay rent with this money, man. My wife is, counting, she might've been my girlfriend actually at that time. I said, but my girlfriend's counting on this money. I can't give it to you because you lost it in blackjack, and he starts getting hot about it. And at one point, and this was a difficult situation. I think if anybody's ever been in therapy or this is the classic slippery situation that causes a lot of people to fall back, and then their relationships get hurt and they end up drinking and all this other type of stuff. But, what my dad said to me at that point, as we were going, he said, the fact that you won't split that money with me when I lost my money, that's the reason you'll be a loser for the rest of your life. And I said, what did you just say to me, man? And he said, you heard me. He's like, you keep that up and you're going to be a loser for the rest of your life. I was like, hit the brakes right now. He's like, what do you mean? I was like, I'm getting out of this car. I was like, you have talked to me like that for a long time. That shit's over. I said, you're the only person in the whole world that thinks that about me, man. I was like, everybody else looks at me and sees somebody that's going to turn into somebody amazing. I said, but you're caught up in this paradigm you know, with kind of a lot of stuff from, you know, whatever it is you need to deal with. But if you don't know that you can't talk to your son that way, you know now. And I'm telling you, stop the car. I'm getting out, you know. And I get out, and I can't remember exactly how it happened, you know, but, you know, I started walking along the road. You know, it was probably a half hour, he came back, and he's driving, and, I apologized, and, it was wrong for me to say that. And, we ended up driving all the way to Minnesota. But and it was kind of quiet. It wasn't like it was over. It wasn't like it was good. It wasn't like it was all awesome from that point on. But there were moments that you remember in your life where you stood up for yourself. And that was one of those moments that I had to have with my dad. And it was in a yucky situation. It was in a horrible, slippery slope where a lot of people would fail in the case of, drug addicted person or drinking, they might end up drinking in that scenario. I didn't, and it ended up working out, okay. My dad and I wouldn't say that my dad and I had, a great relationship from that moment on. I certainly remember it was sort of cold for a while there. But it was really cold from my standpoint. I just needed to move on from sort of an oppressive way of thinking. And that was not the first time I'd been hit with the loser thing. You know what I mean? I definitely been hit with the loser thing many times before that. But what I think is sort of interesting about that is that a lot of people will stand up for themselves in that scenario. And they'll go, yeah, you shouldn't talk to me like that. And they would be right on. Yet they'll play those tapes and they don't think twice about it. And that's worse. Somebody else saying something about you, well, you can be sort of divorced from that. At that point, I was 100% ready to be done with my dad. Now we all have families, so we all know how that works. But I live in Minnesota. My dad lives in Louisiana, and so, we don't often get together. So to have a conflict like this was really kind of a big deal. But I think that going into the new year, there's always a lot of parallels that we talk about, I'm a big believer. I talk a lot about, my addiction and the relationship to food and things of this nature. And, the first 5 years of getting sober was, enlightening to me. I found out a lot about myself. It was really super helpful. But after that point, I sort of had to move on to become who I was supposed to be. And irrespective, I still love seeing my friends that are sober and things of that nature. It's one of the greatest things, greatest gifts I've given to myself. But I don't believe what a lot of people believe about addiction. And the best way to describe it is I believe that, the best way to say it, I heard this recently, was the opposite of addiction isn't sobriety. The opposite of addiction is connection. And when you look at the 5 years and roughly 25 years since then, what I did was I built like this life where I connect with people. I connect with you guys, right? And I believe that, that shared journey of love and support, is what makes all of us, and that's, I think you see that, in the way that we, talk to, the people that, members of each form, but also we encourage you guys to talk to each other that way. So I know, that really doesn't have a lot to do with chicken and kale. But at the end of the day, most people have the problem that I'm talking about rather than the chicken and the kale problem. I don't think that a lot of people explore to the depths that they need to. I don't know if we talked about this, but I know April and I did previous to being on this call, but really what we do with Eat to Perform is we kind of try to take away a lot of the hurdles for you guys so you can get to some level of success. But we do that by giving you information about yourself that you didn't know. And in that process, I think almost everyone wants more information, because when you can like pick one little piece and then master that, like sleep, having your sleep in order and having a routine. There's a lot of people that will say, well, just go to complete darkness and turn off all your screens and stuff like that. It's like, what if I work till 9 o'clock? What if, my kid's got a tummy ache? There's all these things that happen in life that I don't think a lot of these absolute, it's these really rigid systems. It's an example of another rigid system. And we kind of always talk to people about rigid systems, because what ends up happening with rigid systems is that you hit that failure point with a rigid system and then you're off the rails. And so we always argue that, having rails is actually the problem. And so rather than, looking for a perfect world where you can get to sleep exactly at 10 o'clock and kids don't have a tummy ache and your daughter doesn't come in the room at 2 a.m., that's not reality for a lot of people. What's reality for a lot of people is working around that and trying to have some strategies for those types of things. And so what I think we do really well is we walk through people through their real life, rather than here's your book, here's your list of naughty and nice foods, go get them, kid. Oh, by the way, sleep's kind of important and maybe you should exercise. We sort of break it down a little bit more in depth with that. And we did a podcast last week where we talked about, some strategies for overwhelming. I think it was one of the best ones we'd ever done, and if you're, kind of look, here's the deal. I mean, when you start off with anything new, Eat to Perform, Weight Watchers, whatever, there's a tax that needs to be paid. It can be a little confusing. It can be a little bit overwhelming. And so, breaking it down into small pieces sort of makes a difference for a lot of people. But, what I think we try to do is not discount things into being too simplistic, or to say, well, your willpower was weak and things of that nature. I think there's a lot of shaming that goes on. It was sort of interesting. I don't know if you saw like the responses to my Oprah article. What I thought was sort of crazy, because there's like two different worlds, right? There's like the slot world where everybody sort of knows me, and then there's the Facebook world, which is millions of people, and a lot of them are kind of angry. But like Oprah's thing, if not now, when, I just pointed out that was an ultimatum. And people are like, well, I don't see it as an ultimatum. I mean, it is 100% an ultimatum. She's saying to you, you've had poor habits, whatever those habits are, you've got to fix them now. And I could not disagree with that more. I think that's the reason why Oprah has failed all these years. I really feel like, I think we can all agree, that Oprah is one of the most beautiful people on the planet, right? If we said, if we took physical beauty out of the picture, personally, I think Oprah is a very physically beautiful woman. I just think she's radiant, and I love confidence. And it always strikes me that she has confidence in every other piece of her life except for that one piece. And I think the reason why she does, and if you've been around Eat to Perform for a short period of time, you don't know this yet. But what you'll know is you're about to put the Lego pieces in your life together. And you're going to feel better as it relates to your relationship with food, your relationship with your family, your relationship with the gym, your relationship with lots of things. And it doesn't solve every problem immediately. That's sort of what I think my argument would be against the Oprah thing. Is that what she's saying is pull off the Band-Aid as soon as possible. The science does not back up what Oprah's saying, that, your health is poor because you're carrying, some fat on your body, and therefore, you've got to solve that problem immediately. The science is very clear on this. If you're inactive, and people who undereat typically aren't as active people who eat an adequate amount for what they do. If you're inactive compared to someone that's active with a similar body fat, the person that's active has health numbers off the charts compared to the inactive person, right? The reason why I think that that's important to say, and I say it a lot, is because it allows you to be patient. Now, at the same note, okay, some of you do have fat to use, and some of you are new to Eat to Perform, and you're going to ask me a question. Well, how am I going to lose weight eating this amount of food? Well, I guess it sort of depends on, were you overeating when you came into Eat to Perform? I think a lot of people would go, yes, I was, because I have more fat on my body than I would like. Well, if you were overeating and you eat your total daily energy expenditure, you'll lose weight. But the problem is you weren't overeating, and you kind of know it, right? And so what ends up happening is, yes, getting your metabolism heading in the right direction, there's going to require a little bit of patience, and it's going to require a little bit of faith on your part that your body, from an evolutionary standpoint, actually is a little bit smarter than you are, and if you take that process, and sometimes people will go, well, I don't want to gain weight. We can do it where you don't gain weight. But you're going to have to be more patient, and you're not going to be able to look at your fat loss goals as quickly as you like, right? So let's say that you were under eating, and at this point, I'm going to be boring a lot of the people that have been hearing this for the last 3 years, but there's a lot of people that are new, so I'm just going to kind of run through it real quick. If you've been eating 1,200 calories, it's going to take you a while to get up to where you want to go. Well, if you're willing to gain, 2 to 3 pounds, maybe 3 to 5 pounds, depending on what you weigh, then you can sort of get there a little quicker. If every time you gain a pound or two, you freak out, well, it's probably a little bit smarter for you to be a little bit more patient. I think one of the best things about Eat to Perform, and once again, my dog makes the podcast. I tell my kids every single time to take her collar off, because then, when she shakes, like nobody would know. But the most underrated aspect of fat loss, and almost nobody talks about this. When you ask people, they say, well, I want to lose fat and I want to gain muscle. Okay, awesome. The only problem is, unless you were just eating like a moron, you weren't training, then that's kind of not possible. If you've been working out, this isn't your first diet rodeo, there needs to be some nuance to it, right? But what most people don't realize is that if you've been eating 1,300 calories on and off for a while, and yeah, I know you had Dairy Queen that one time, and I know that you had, wine at book club. Trust me, that's not the reason why you're carrying excessive fat on your body. One of the reasons why you're carrying excessive fat on your body is your metabolism compromised. You're supposed to have periods of up, periods of down. That's what allows your body to thrive. And oh, by the way, that is the lean mass that you supposedly want. But the problem is that everybody wants lean mass, but what they really want is to get rid of excessive fat. And bad news for you, you ain't going to be able to do it. You have to have a concerted effort both ways. And I can break it down for you from a math standpoint where you can reach your goals relatively quickly doing both sides. But almost everyone struggles just going down. And then ultimately you set up just a bad hormonal experience within your body, and you end up kind of getting stuck.
I think Oprah is the prime example of, failing at diets when you look at from the time that she started, like even on television, the time that she started up until now, just look at the different years of heavier, skinny, heavier, skinny, heavier. She is the epitome of exactly what we teach about the wrong approach, because nothing she has ever done has been sustainable. So you can either yo-yo back and forth through the skinny, heavy, more fat, less fat, or you can take a slower, sustainable lifetime approach,
Yeah, I mean, to be 100% clear, I absolutely believe that Oprah believes that she is lacking in will. But once again, the science does not back that up. Once again, the science points to the fact that chronic dieters actually have much more willpower than regular people. And so that sort of breaks that fallacy. But the problem that you run into is when you go to the extremes, like Oprah is actually suggesting, and I know some people are going to take issue with that, but she really is. I mean, she wants to solve a lifetime of problems. She believes that willpower is the issue. Look, here's the deal. I mean, I'll tell you this. A lot of people are saying in the comments, and I've been very defensive about that because, it starts to get to a point of fat shaming and stuff like that. And, I just don't have any tolerance for that kind of stuff. But at the same time, people are sort of pointing out, if Oprah has all the trainers in the world, if Oprah has, chefs and all these things that allow her success, why is Weight Watchers going to be the thing, right? I mean, you think this is her first rodeo? I'll tell you, Oprah stained the psyche of women all over the world with that don't eat anything after 6 p.m. nonsense, that was really not based in any scientific evidence at all, is based on anecdotal evidence. The interesting thing about, what Oprah was talking about at that time was based off of a study that talked about insulin, and HGH and kind of like the restorative hormones that happen when you sleep, and that they basically are antagonists against each other. And so therefore, if you don't have, food, you can end up, leaning out, and sort of irrespective of calories, but I'm sure, the whole idea was to eat less at that time. But what was the most interesting thing about the study that all that science was based on was that there were two groups. And the people that ate at night, they maintained their muscle. And so while they didn't necessarily lose as much fat as the other people, they actually were in a better position than the people that, you know, were starting to see kind of their muscle atrophy and things of this nature. And so it was sort of interesting from that point. That was sort of the flip side of that, you know, and I'm sort of doing that from memory. But I remember there was two sides to that argument. And, you know, since then, you know, the timing stuff has been debunked a million ways. And, you know, virtually everyone at Eat to Perform knows, you know, one, if, you know, you're full and you're not hungry going to bed, you sleep better. The deeper you sleep, you know, the more restorative sleep you have. And therefore, you know, the more your body can actually process the nutrients. You know, if you wake up after 4 hours because your cortisol's out of whack, you know, is that going to be better than, you know, having, you know, a decent sized meal at 8 p.m., you know, with dessert and then sleeping the night through? And so, you know, the science always really shows that it comes down to, you know, calories in, calories out. I know that that's a little flawed, you know, from some people's perspective, but once again, that's a little overdone. The only way that you can really solve a puzzle is to take all pieces of data and analyze it for yourself. And so, you know, some people, you know, process fats better. Some people process carbohydrates better. I think both sides, you know, can be a little, you know, they don't test it enough, you know, to see what really works for them. And ultimately, they don't have activity as a priority in their life. You know, it's fat loss is number one on the list, you know, and then it's family, and then it's, you know, soccer and church, you know, whatever, you know, however it works for you. But fat loss is always here. And like, we're okay with fat loss being on the list. It's just the first thing all the time. You know, at some point, you know, you have to analyze the way that you think, you know, and change, you know, your point of view. Now, everyone listening to this right now certainly is open to that idea. Otherwise, you wouldn't have bought Eat to Perform. I mean, if you're listening to this podcast and you haven't bought Eat to Perform, you know, virtually, you know, there's 64 people watching this. There's only 100 people that can even be in it. And all of them are members. And so we offer this up for members. And, you know, we have similar classes to this on a daily basis. We have our fundamentals, we have our quick start program, and we have group coaching. And, you know, depending on, you know, what you bought and why, you know, depends on kind of the size of the classes. Obviously, our group coaching is our, you know, kind of a elite package, and you get, you know, a lot more attention, you know.
On the subject of fat loss, I had a group coaching call today with a new person, and I was talking to her in regards to her training and goals and so forth. And I said, you know, well, you know, what are your goals? She had just started CrossFit like a month ago, and I was like all giddy and excited because I'm like, oh, we can like transform you quick. You know, you just have to listen to me. You know, we can do big things. Yeah. And then I was asking her about her goals, and she's like, you know, of course, you know, performance and, you know, such as this. Well, then she got real quiet, and she said, and, you know, of course, you know, body composition, fat loss, and, you know, I'm not going to lie. I was like, well, of course. I said, you know, we all want that. I said, don't be embarrassed to say that that's what a goal is. I said, you know, to some extent, you know, we're all working towards looking better naked and, you know, being a better person. And, you know, we all want to look good to some extent. So, you know, don't be embarrassed to say that that's one of your goals. It's everybody's goal. you know.
I mean, I actually think that, one of the things that I get most concerned about with Eat to Perform is that people do, appreciate the food freedom part of it, and then often will overlook their goals, their long-term goals. And so they'll come in and they might have some goals, and we'll sort of walk them through the process of being a little bit patient, and then they'll sort of neglect their goals, or we'll get them stabilized, and we'll go through something like the Gradually Awesome approach or performance focused fat loss, and then they won't kind of remember what started them on this path, right? And so I always bring up the fact that I was 230 pounds. I always bring up the fact that I'm 175 and have been so for about 5 years now. The reason why is because there was definitely times where I was uncomfortable, but it was short periods of time. The good majority of the time I was eating. I mean, there was certainly times where I was eating a lot of calories, a lot of food. I think that's the other thing too that sort of gets overdone, is like people think we're all about like we want them to eat all the time. Once again, that doesn't reflect my journey. When I first started off, I was working out 2 times a day. I was certainly creating a deficit, but I was eating 3,500, 4,000 calories a day some days. But I was sick. I was kind of hurt. I had always like a little something. If you want to know if I eat, a ridiculous amount of food, or April eats a ridiculous amount of food on a daily basis, we don't. One of the reasons why we don't, because we don't necessarily want to kill ourselves in the gym. We don't necessarily, like, that doesn't fit our goals. We sort of know what works for us, and I think for all of you, I think there's a lot of people that think that they need to earn their food. We haven't talked about this in a long time, but this is the time of year where everyone thinks that they need to earn their food. I'm saying to you, if you were inactive and if you were stressed out and you weren't sleeping, let's start to fix those things. Let's get your food in order. And then at the end of the day, we'll look at periods of focused fat loss. And, I'm proof positive that, that works. And then, it's sort of interesting because people think like I'm the only one or something. I mean, at this point, I can speak fairly confident because we've had thousands of people come through here. One of the best days for April and I is when we see someone that we worked with 2 years ago and they're still doing fine. They figured it out. I'm sort of glad that we've been able to create like this social culture that allows those people to stay around. Like I say to those people when I see them, I'm like, man, you should really join Science Lab Off Topic or the meal planning group. People would love you. Oh yeah, I'm just too busy. But the nice thing about what you guys are experiencing just coming in is you're experiencing a level of support, that didn't exist 2 years ago. It was 8 of us and, we were over our head, and that was a little bit of kind of what we started talking about. And so, I would challenge everyone, part of what I'm able to do, what April does, we don't dig these huge holes for ourselves. I was at a gym recently. I stopped in there. I can't remember. It was like a few friends of mine I know work out there, and they were going through paleo challenge, and everyone was kind of starving and angry. And I came back a couple months later, and it was interesting because everybody was working out better, but it was fairly clear, people had kind of dropped into a lot of bad habits. That's where the rigidity really works against people. If you're gonna have beer occasionally, have a plan for the beer. If you're gonna have some pasta, there's no reason why that can't help your goals at certain times. But when we're trying to focus on, kind of addressing maybe a health issue, for some people it is a little bit of a health issue, right? But I mean, if you were morbidly obese like I was, doing anything was, more than I was doing, so just walking out the door was going to be better than what I was doing on a daily basis. It wasn't that I had pizza on Fridays. It was that I had pizza on Tuesdays and I had Mexican on Wednesdays. And, I always ate. I was actually in one of my group coaching calls today. I said it was like amazing that I ever got to be obese, because the level of energy and the level of excitement that I've always walked through life this way. You know what I mean? Like I joke, that no one should walk through the produce aisle with the level of intensity that I have about produce, but that's the way I am about life. I just I just enjoy life, and I think, for a lot of you guys, it's going to be really exciting. I think the thing that's going to be really different for you is you're not buying a system. April and I, we'll coach you, we'll get you in the right direction. But we do it. When you look at one of the reasons why, we're going to be a, like I said, employee-owned company, is because every single person started with Eat to Perform. I think there's only one person in the whole organization, because she has a very special skill set, but even her, has sort of kind of moved into the way that we think. We didn't ask her or make her do that. She just chose to do it. But, the fact that we can do this, every day of our life, is pretty special. I mean, there's really not a lot of diets, CEO of Weight Watchers ain't doing Weight Watchers every day. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I think that's kind of, it kind of tells something when the people that are coaching you, the people that are guiding you, practice what they preach. It's when, it's kind of like when you're younger and your parents tell you not to do something, you see them doing it, and you're like, how are you going to tell me, I can't do this when or anybody for that matter. You have to practice what you preach, and, and actually, you're walking along the journey with them because you're on your own journey.
Yeah, and kind of getting back to that whole, addiction cycle and stuff like that, one of the reasons why I kind of had to move on from that at a certain point was because that was a rigid approach, and even though, I had no, thoughts about drinking or using drugs, it was really like this really, you had to do this, and it was very specific, and I felt very, because I wasn't just sober. I was a counselor. I worked at the facilities. And so I didn't feel like I could ask clients to do something if I didn't hold myself to that same standard. And that's why I don't necessarily believe in that model, as much as I did at that time, because I think the rigidity of it, causes more problems than it helps. And that's why, a lot of those facilities and stuff struggle. There's a lot of great introspection. I have no negative things to say about, my experiences with that and the relationships that I developed through that. But, when you look at what allows you to recover from something like that, it really is the connections that you're making with the people. It's not like, if you were in drug treatment, you can't cuss, you can't do this, you can't do that. There were a lot of rules about all the things that you could do. And once again, I totally get it. You should wake up at a certain time, your shoes should be clean, all that other type of stuff. What I'm saying though, is that, life doesn't work like that. Life throws you curveballs. Life, has you in a situation where your dad's calling you a loser, and you have to stand up for yourself. And, I think when you have a support system in place and you're surrounded by love, people are going to think that I am like the most, touchy-feely guy on the planet. But, I really, I am a big believer in that idea. Okay, so for this, if you're new, this isn't really like a Q&A kind of thing. It's really more we take a topic and we sort of break it down. That's why we kind of wanted to do this whole idea of taking ownership for your journey. The last thing I wanted to end on with this is, just because we're trying to get you to have a better understanding of your relationship with food doesn't mean that we're not committed to you seeing results, and it doesn't mean that you shouldn't be committed seeing results. One of the things that I will often say to my group coaching clients is, if you're going to enter a performance-focused fat loss phase and you're excited about it, and they'll say, yeah, I'm totally excited about it. It's like, good. Remember that 5 weeks from now, because it's going to get a little hard, and you're going to have resolve at that point. The problem is that if you do a 6-month plan, it's hard to keep your resolve for 6 months, and that's why we can sort of walk people through, and why, ultimately they see fat loss up and fat loss down. And that's sort of the big secret to Eat to Perform. Not that it's a big secret. I basically tell it all the time, so it's like the worst kept secret ever. All right, you guys. Well, I appreciate everybody being here. It's nice having a lot of new people on board, and it's really exciting, being part of Eat to Perform at this point. We're certainly seeing a lot of people very interested in what we're doing, and we're excited to be able to help you guys. So we are going to let you guys go. April, did you want to say goodbye?
Good night, everyone.
And Kira is still napping back there, so we'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye. All right.